Everyone. Welcome to the Yakima Chief Hops Hop and Brew School session. We're here with a panel of some incredible brewers from around the world here, and here to talk about dry hopping best practices. So I'll do a little bit of introductions as well. So we've got Mike LaRosa from New Trail Brewing. We've got Chris Drainer from First Fire Check.
Hi.
We've got Robin Headforeman from the Beak Brewery. And we've got Brandon Morris from Creature Comforts. I'm also joined by my colleague, Pierre Niewidowski, who's going to be manning the chat. So if anyone's got any questions that we haven't got pre-run on this one, feel free to fire them into the Q&A session. And Pierre next to me will be pointing them out to the team. So without further ado, I'm going to roll into the first of the kind of pre-questions we've got. So this is, I'll run this round to everyone, but what hop products do you kind of regularly use in your brewing process, like by stage? So kind of preferred use in a kettle, preferred in the whirlpool, in dry hopping as well. And is there any particular reason why you've chosen that for your particular brew house? And I'll start that with Mike.
We use entirely pellets through our process. I find that the flavor and aroma that we're getting in our IPAs is best when we use pellets. I'm not seeing a ton of loss in my product. I'm currently operating on a 15-barrel brew house, which we're going to produce about 25,000 barrels a year off of. I'd say on an average IPA yield, I'm seeing anywhere from 13.5 to 14.25 into my bright tank. So obviously there's packaging loss downstream, but I have used products like CO2 extract in the past for bittering. I've tried cryo. I've been a part of a few breweries that were a part of the innovation of some of the products that are used now for YCH. And for me, I guess I'm a traditionalist, or as traditional as pellets can be.
Oh, how about you, Chris?
So yeah, we're probably pretty similar there. Tends to be whenever we have collaborations and stuff coming through that we raid the cryo stock and all the innovative products. But yeah, mostly like T90 pellets we get used throughout the process. But yeah, we've had good results with cryo. One of the first beers that we're packaging now on the canning line will be 100% cryo. So we were always worried about like having a lack of depth of flavor with just having pure cryo, but it seems to be tasting pretty good so far. We'll see how it holds up in can.
Excellent. So
Hi, sorry, I'm late.
Quickly welcome Nathaniel to the call as well. From Cerveceria Aguamaya, if I pronounced that right.
Correct.
So then I'll bounce that same question over to Robin. So kind of, is there any particular hop products that you like to use per process?
Yeah, I think we're pretty much the same in that, in terms of majority hot side, we're using T90 and a bit of BBC as well. And then, yeah, full pellet, cold side, obviously. And we found the cryo, we really like it, using it just as like a end of ferment dry hop for our dippers and things like that. We mainly seem to be using the cryo. We tried some 100% or mostly cryo IPAs, and I thought they were a little lacking personally. So we've always tried to make it like sort of 10 or 20% of the hop bill. So yeah, pretty traditional, I would say. No oils. We've given them a try and not really felt that they suited our beers, to be honest. So
cool. And how about you, Brandon?
Yeah, so we use a little bit of everything. Cryo and T90, is a mixture. We tend to limit our hot side additions to around a pound per barrel T90 equivalent. So when we do our cryo calculations, we treat those as half, 50% T90 equivalent. And that's just kind of a general guideline for our recipes for our whirlpool, just to keep our yields in check where we want them. We also use some extracts. We use some CO2 extract in some of our less hop forward beers, just as bittering. and train, kind of plain. There's a dark beer that we make, a porter that we make every year that doesn't have a lot of hop flavor. It has some adjuncts downstream. So we use CO2 extract there just for pure yield. We get our bitterness and our flavor that we need. We use some Tetra ISO extract, which is just a liquid extract that we use in kettle sours. Because again, we don't need hop flavor, but we need some alpha acids, and it helps the foam a bit. And then we've tried incognito and some of the pourable extracts in our APAs, but they're just general top note, kind of using those to complement other varieties or to limit the overall vegetal matter in the beer. For dry hopping, it's almost all T90 and cryo pellets. A couple T45s, but we also have run into problems with processing, where suppliers sometimes will delay processing for a different pellet type, and the hops may degrade in that time. So a lot of what we're doing now is selecting specific lots for specific beers. So we're about to go into hop selection this year. We're about to go Yakima, and the idea being that we can, actually tailor our lots to the presentation we want in the beer. So we spend a lot of time worrying about that, and just kind of try to keep our hop types specific to the recipe.
Excellent. So Nathaniel, so the question we've put through to the team is, are there any particular hop products that you prefer to use in any particular stages of your brewing process?
Oh, okay, well, we're pretty traditional. We use mostly T90 in all of our processes. We have started using cryo. We use it mostly in the dry hopping stage, in the fermenters, and the fermentation to try to reduce a little bit of our, have less waste. But basically we use T90 just about everywhere, and we have great results with it.
Excellent. And then I suppose the direct follow-up question for everyone on here is, are there any specific varieties that you guys prefer in individual brewing processes, individual places in the system as well? So Mike.
Yeah, I use a lot of Citra. I mean, we make a lot of IPA, and Citra is sort of like an easy, cheap trick. I would say of like the newer varieties that are coming out, I love Talus. I think Talus has really been super fruit forward and has provided a lot of tropical flavors that Sabro, while Sabro is extremely like coconut forward, I'm finding that Talus is like way more like on the pineapple pina colada side of that coconut spectrum. I mean, for me though, like I'm about the classic new American hops, Citra, Mosaic, Simcoe, Amarillo. I do use some German hops, Tettnang, or Americanized German hops like Allertal Blanc, but it's really style dependent. But we make a lot of IPA, so. I think we're having trouble hearing you, Luke.
Can you guys hear me all right?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, got you now.
Perfect. Sorry about that. How about you, Chris? You got any particular favorites at any particular point in your brewing process?
I mean, we brew IPA, so all the citras and everything, we're all about that. But I think oddly, like myself and Lucas here on the floor, we find both of ourselves like really loving Columbus still. Like I'm coming into my 10th year in brewing now, and like I still get a kick out of opening Columbus. That was the first incredible hop that I've ever brewed with. I think even we tried one of the cryo Columbus in one of the beers there. I can't remember what point it was, but it was like, yeah, I'm all about that. But yeah, outside of that, I think one of the hops that I tend to go back to when I'm creating a recipe myself, I find good results with Idaho 7. Yeah, and then everything else that was mentioned prior, we're all about that.
Robin, how about you guys?
Yeah, we seem, I mean, obviously we're making tons of IPA as well, so yeah, loads of Citra, loads of Mosaic, but we seem to be actually, just by our contracting, doing mostly Idaho in a lot of our IPAs. It seems to be becoming a bit of a signature for us. Got my hands on a bit of Talus and was pretty pleased with that. I personally really like the sort of coconutty vibes from Sabro, but I know that a lot of people don't really vibe with it that much. It seems to be a bit of a weird one on the market here at the UK. So yeah, we did have a beer that featured it pretty heavily, but it sort of started waning a bit in popularity and being a bit divisive. So we've put that one on the back burner for now. But yeah, Idaho 7, I think, is our signature hop at the moment, definitely.
If I could echo that sentiment with from Robin too, I really love Sabro. I do find that it tends to be very coconutty for people that don't like coconut, but I like coconut. So
I mean, I like Sriracha as well, so it's
yeah. Aaron's a super divisive hops. Yeah, right.
That's funny.
How about you guys, Brandon?
Yeah, so I've got my own personal loves. I'd say I'm really digging Strata. We've leaned into Strata in some of our year-round recipes. We actually retooled our double IPA last year and added Strata into that, and it was awesome. It's really improved the beer. I'm also a sucker for a good Chinook. That's another one that's in a couple of our recipes. It's always kind of hiding in there, and actually developing a new beer that's really Chinook forward, which has been surprisingly fruity and tropical. And Spencer Tealkemeyer from YCH is actually helping me with that. And he's a huge cheerleader of the Columbus Cryo. He even managed to sneak a little bit of that pilot. So those are really fun. As far as like where in the process, we have changed some of our recipes to kind of lean into some of the research that folks are doing on bound versus free thiols. And so putting hops with more bound thiols on the hot side, hops with more free thiol, more in the dry hop. And so with Idaho 7, you guys say y'all love that. We love it as well. And we've moved it out of our dry hops completely and put it in the whirlpool, which actually we think we get better clarity of flavor when we do that. And then take hops like Cascade and move them to the dry hop and out of the whirlpool. So we've kind of been playing with that. And with some of our year-round beers, you can definitely see a change in the presentation of the recipe just by moving those around a little bit and playing with what's going on there. And that's been really fun for us to just kind of use some of the cutting edge sulfur compound research and some of the other things that YCH has been doing to move some of our hops around. But yeah, similar stuff.
Yeah, I would echo that with the Idaho hot side, definitely.
Yeah.
It's been, when we've moved around some of the recipes, just to have that, the bulk of it being Idaho in the whirlpool, it's massive difference.
Yeah, that's great.
That's interesting to me because I'm not having a lot of great success with Idaho 7, but I am primarily using it in the dry hop. So
Try whirlpool.
yeah, I guess so. I'm gonna have to try now.
Idaho in the whirlpool and Simcoe in the dry hop has been a big change for a couple of our beers. Really
Yeah.
like it.
Old school Simcoe or new school Simcoe?
Did both.
Yeah.
Oh, and Nathaniel, how about you guys? Is there kind of any varieties that you just absolutely love using in your brew house?
Well, similar to most of our other panelists here, we do a lot of IPAs. We like Mosaic, Citra, Sabro, Idaho 7, but we also do a lot of experimentation. We try to make a new beer every single week, and we love all the new stuff you guys are coming out with. We've been playing around by making smash, single hop, single malt, and the ones that have really shined in that is things like Falconers, things that you wouldn't have thought of. It's a beautiful mix of hops. We really like it. If you put it all by itself, all the way through the process, it's a really nice hop. Similarly, Sabro came through really nicely. I agree with the coconut flavors, excellent hops. And we're always looking forward to the new stuff you guys are bringing out because there's always something new and something fun to try. So I always ask for whatever's new and at least give it a shot. And sometimes you really get surprised by what you get.
Then I'm going to change gear ever so slightly because this is probably one of the questions that we get asked about the most, and it's certainly something that Brandon touched on a little bit with some of the research that Spencer and his team have been doing as well. But to do with active dry hopping as well, is that something that you guys do? Is something you could do occasionally or regularly? And are there any varieties that you think specifically lean towards that to get the most impact in finished beer?
I'll jump in there. So yeah, we found really good results doing active firm with cryo. In terms of variety, I've not sort of narrowed down on any one thing. So again, we're basically mainly doing it for our dippers where we wouldn't be repitching yeast anyway. So because it was such a small brewery, I need to keep that yeast strain going, and I don't really want to be repitching from a firm dry hop. So yeah, so we just do it in the dippers, as I say, only because of a kind of logistics thing. If I could do it in all our other IPAs, I would. Yeah, we've had basically, we did do a bit with T90 and we just found it to be a bit stringent, and the cryo just seems to pull out a lot of flavor, leave this just base kind of juiciness that we don't get if we're just doing even the same quantity of cryo post firm. So
I guess I'll play or start to play the other side on it. I've done both ways, and I haven't had, well, let me back up. I've done it both ways where we've done active firm dry hops, and I had a lot of really great success early on with getting a lot of juice flavors and tropical aromas and yada, yada, yada. I found over time, though, that I was finding more diacetyl in the product, the VDK production from it, and experiencing hop creep. So my practice now is I finish fermentation. Generally, fermentation for us takes about 4 to 5 days to hit terminal gravity, and then we're waiting probably about 48, 72 hours from the initial terminal gravity reading before we dry hop. But I do love the flavors when it works from active firm dry hopping.
So I found any creep I sort of work it into our double IPA recipes, in that it's quite nice. It actually dries them out a little bit more. So we're using London Fog, which can be a bit sweeter on the higher gravities.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm not well, touch wood, not noticed anything in any creep in can yet. But we do give our dippers like a long time in tank. So
how long are you holding your dry hop at?
So what am I doing? Let me just think about this. So yeah, it would be a plate or two, depending on where I can catch it. Above terminal would have the ferment dry hop, and then we would let that go probably another day or two, depending on how long it creeps down. We're using ALDC, so I'm not too concerned about diet production. And then, yeah, once it's hit terminal, we'll crash to 15, let it sit for 48 hours, and then we'll dry hop, and we'll hold the dry hop for 2 days, 48 hours.
Yeah, I mean, it's relatively similar to what I was doing. We're like 3 days. We're 3 days from the hops entering the tank before we're crashing. But we're also using we're using ALDC as well. I can't speak highly enough for that product.
Oh my God, it's just, yeah, because we had a few batches at the beginning when we opened it. They were getting some diet sort of post pack, even after they'd passed BDK, like.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, just amazing. So cheap for like £3 a batch or something.
Yeah, of course.
Just completely eliminated the problem for us. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, we're similar, except I was discussing with the guys before we got live. All of our dry hops are warm. We don't really enjoy the flavor that we get from cool dry hops over here, and so we usually dry hop at 70 or 72 Fahrenheit, and it's usually on day 4 to 6 of fermentation. So
what is that for us Europeans?
Oh,
that's 21 or something.
Oh, yeah. I don't do conversions. Come on.
Oh, okay, all right.
For Americans, we're always right.
Yeah, right. But we technically, I think you would call it an active fermentation. It's the tail end of fermentation for us. So there are a couple beers that we don't. Our main cropping yeast is in our IPA, and so we harvest that yeast on day 4 or 5. And then dry hop immediately after that. So we're pretty quick turn. With the use of ALDC and a centrifuge, we are able to pretty much, we have a GC as well. So we'll run diacetyl numbers on that. Past GC, we've got a cutoff, and we continue after that. So a little bit different methods, but it's similar. I'd say that the dry hopping during active fermentation is more important for us for stirring. We do a short recirc, but we find that if we're kind of waiting to the tail end, we just don't get as much flavor out of the hops in general if we're dry hopping after it's done. So that's been what's worked for us. That's using English ale yeast or WLP-08 is our main hazy yeast that we use, which is another English strain. So similar to what y'all do, just a little little different.
And you're getting enough yeast at the warm temperatures to start another 100 hec batch, or
Yeah. So that's we use not 1968, it's 002, and it is just a monster flocculator. So it drops out as soon as it starts to finish, and that's just been a kind of a trial and error over the years of how to treat that yeast and how to keep it healthy, and then repitch. We get about 10 generations, 10, 12 generations out of that. I don't have too much trouble with it, thankfully.
Yeah, we do something similar. Most of what we do is at tail end of fermentation. We give it a day or two to stabilize at terminal gravity, and then we hit it with hops. Recircuit about 2 hours, let it sit in the tank for 2 to 3 days, and then we crash it. And that's pretty standard on most of our IPAs, pale ales, and whatnot. That's kind of how we use it, and we've gotten good results on that. Which ones do we like more? We like Citrus, really nice at the end. I love Sabro at the end. What else? There's some, I believe it's Yukonok that we've been using mixed with other hops. It's a nice hop to mix. Kind of helps other hops bring out their flavors. One of our favorite ones, as I mentioned earlier, is Falconer's. It's been working really well in dry hopping as well.
I guess on our side, we've tried to, or everything is so new on our kit at the moment, and we've got a very, very small team. So we've been just trying to like standardize things. So all our dry hops for the moment are getting done at the end of fermentation, and the beer has been chilled to this is like a very low. Like I don't think I've heard of any brewer like brewing like hazy stuff at the temperature that we're dry hopping at. We're at 12 degrees Celsius, which is, I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. I've seen someone is converting these values in the chat.
50, 55 maybe?
58.
58, so that's quite on the low side. But what we're doing is like trying to standardize it with the small team, that all our dry hops happen on a Friday. The tanks automatically drop to 0 on a Sunday. So by the time we get in on Monday morning, all our tanks are just courting that 0 degrees crash. And then we start dropping off the cone for 3 days until we're happy with that the hops are out there. And we get like, we're pretty happy with the results we're getting. No hop creep, good representation of the hops that we're putting in, and less stress for the small team. No one's having to think about coming in on weekends to drop cones or anything like that. Or
I will say something that worked for us, and this came from Dogfish Head paper a while back, that's pre-dry hop but cleaned up our dry hop flavor, is getting really fastidious about true dropping 24 hours after we go to the tank. When we're using pretty heavy hop loads in the whirlpool, like I'm sure everybody is, and our whirlpool's a tiny bit undersized. And so we're getting a little more trub in there than we'd like. And when we really started, standardizing that trub drop, X number of buckets 24 hours after the last batch goes in, we noticed we got less mercaptan, less vegetal, all that kind of stuff carrying over. And that was a big difference for us. And that's days before any dry hops even go in there. It was very useful. So highly recommend looking into that if you're getting any of those vegetal flavors in your IPA. Start with the trub, then start with the cone drops like Chris was talking about. That helps.
That's what, 24 hours after beer goes into the fermenter, you're saying?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's similar practice.
We basically have a baby version of your brew house, Brandon. So we exactly the same thing. And it's working well for us.
Yeah.
Segments quite nicely onto the next thing, which is there like one particular trick or knack that you guys have worked out along those lines for your brew houses, or in breweries you've worked in the past, even like on a homebrew scale or anything like that, that is just, if you could give one piece of advice on kind of, this is the trick to dry hopping, what would you give out there?
Oxygen control.
What did you say, Robin?
Oxygen. or lack of.
Yeah, don't put oxygen in.
Lots of it,
Yeah.
just so much of it.
Yeah. No, I mean, seriously though, like you see a lot of weird, I don't know, in the UK, I've seen a few sort of odd methods of dry hopping, or at least I think are a bit odd. And some of which definitely introduce must be north of 100 ppb. And it's just like, well, great, but you know, that's not fun. Yeah, you can be getting great hop flavor out, and then a month down the line and pack, it's just going to be still gone. I think there's a lot of, I think in the UK scene at least, there's certain amounts of like things that work on a homebrew scale that have just been scaled up and not really, it's not quite as mature as it maybe is over the pond. But yeah, that would be my main one that I've seen.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'd echo that. I think if there was one trick, I think it's standardizing your method of dry hopping for your facility. You know, we use a hop gun because we've got these big old tall tanks that we can't get to the top of, and we're using 400 pounds at a time. So it's just not feasible for a person to pour bags in. So once you standardize that and you can limit oxygen ingress, like Robin was saying, that's number one for just getting good flavor. And then number two for me is always been recirculate. Again, as with temperature, we've done trials side by side, recirculated hops, you know, with a pump, turning the tank over gently always gets us better flavor. So
can I ask what sort of pump you're using for recirculate?
Right now it's a PD pump. We used to use a centrifugal pump, but we switched. So again, those are kind of pricey. Not everybody's going to want to buy one of those, you know, to do it. But the load pump helps a lot. It's much gentler. Doesn't shear anything or bust up.
Yeah.
It might be left over.
Yeah, we're looking into at the moment. So we're like a very young brewery. So at the moment we're just literally rousing with CO2.
Yeah.
Sort of over 48 hours. But we're looking into getting a recirc pump. So I think it'll just shorten the dry hop time so much and make it that much more consistent. Definitely.
Yeah, load pumps or recirculates and yeast pitching has been a good.
Good
I wanted to. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to like for like oxygen, like what are you guys shooting for wort, like wort aeration oxygen? That's something that we've been trialing with or playing around with and trying to find the sweet spot. And like we're shooting for almost uncomfortably high wort aeration for all of our hazy stuff, and we're getting better results. But
I've found the same.
Yeah.
1.6
so we're using fog.
Yeah. Sorry.
So yeah, with fog we're shooting very high. Like, well, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. It's like 20 ppm or something. Yeah.
But are you finding all of that's used up by the end of fermentation? Because like I've used with other yeasts in previous breweries, and I found like Bright Tank DO was coming from that not being fully used up.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, but here it's not an issue. Everything's under 5 parts per billion. But yeah.
Yeah, no, not carrying through into the finish beer at all. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think I just sent that in the chat. Ours is yeast specific, and for hazies, which are the 008 for us, or we've used 007 before as well, 1.6 ppm per degree Plato, so pretty high. If it's an 18 Plato beer, 25, 26 ppm.
Yeah,
and those yeasts are oxygen hungry. But then for 002, just English ale, 1.1 or 1 ppm per degree Plato is much safer for us.
I wanted to echo an earlier sentiment that Robin had with rousing the CO2. We rouse twice. We'll rouse right when the hops get put in. So we're operating on 15 barrel up to 120 barrel tanks. So we just want to make sure that all the hops, there isn't a raft at the top. And then we're not recirculating, but we are on the second or third day rousing the hops, gently. It's not like a vigorous rouse.
What size tanks is that up to, sorry?
15 barrel up to 120 barrel.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only other dry hop trick would be get most of the yeast out That's another
I'd
thing.
agree
Either
with
through
you
harvest
with
or
that.
drop. Get most of the yeast out. It's just going to suck those hops down. It's going to absorb to them and take them out of solution. So you're not really getting good flavor, I think.
I would agree with that. We were talking about the uni tanks with Chris before everything, you know, especially if you guys are using uni tanks and not able to fuge or transfer your product with any sort of filtration. Getting all that yeast out is really, really important.
Yeah. Our tanks as well, like our full drain on our tanks is really unobstructed, so it's really good or really easy to get a full to drop the cone out. On a previous brewery, we had like standpipes that kind of blocked the full drain. So like at the end, like luckily we had a centrifuge there, but yeah, it made for pretty inefficient cone drops where you're dropping your cone, but half of it's hiding behind the standpipe. So that was a bit of a nightmare. But luckily here it's like unobstructed. Yeah.
Is anybody adding anything with their hops while they're dry hopping, like acids or salts?
Yeah, we adjust with a bit of phosphoric.
Yeah, I'm adjusting with calcium chloride right now. I've been interested in possibly adjusting the pH, the dry hop too.
To keep the pH low?
To try to keep
yeah.
the pH a little bit lower. My original thought, or a friend of mine in brewing, he and I had been talking, like you add salt with, you know, with pretty much every food you cook. Why wouldn't you add salt when you dry hop? So that's where that sort of idea came from.
Interestingly, ALDC, y'all probably know this, but for the attendees here, you know, it's more effective at lower pHs, and it loses effectiveness when you get up into dry hop pH range.
For sure.
That's pretty cool. Maybe that's getting a little more bang for your buck out of it that way.
Maybe. I don't know. I had this weird beer. I did like I called it a citric IPA. It was like kind of like a sour IPA, but we soured it in the fermenter with a mix of winemaking acids, and my ppb on my DO was like 0. So you know, it's just a weird finding that I found on that one. Usually, I mean, we're getting anywhere below 10 to 20 in a bright tank, but to hit like 0.1 was wild.
I'm just hearing of all this stuff that I can't add into my tank now with this Reinheitsgebot. Yeah.
It's funny.
Are you not allowed to add acids or anything?
Nope.
The
Really?
salt?
Oh my lord.
It just unless I start dry hopping with acid malt.
Yeah. What could go wrong?
Yeah.
Could you do a little lactic tank and then pasteurize it and add that or something silly?
That would be, but that's
right.
a bit of a capital investment. For,
Yeah.
But that would be an ideal solution, but not. There's other things high up on the list to buy just yet.
Acid malt was a game changer for us too.
Nathaniel, how about you? Is there anything kind of a particular like unique thing or a particular this is the game changer for us?
Well, I agree. Standardization. We use both, you know, the hop rocket or just hopping in the top, but just making sure that throughout all our processes and all our tanks, we do the same sort of a thing works well. I know it's an industry standard, but what also has helped us is just the 2 pounds per, you know, hot side and 2 pounds per cold side per BVL. That usually works fairly well. When we go above that, we don't see as much of a utilization or as much benefit from using more than that. So that's usually a pretty good general rule. I don't know if anyone else on the panel uses that rule for IPAs, but that's an easy rule that seems to work fairly well for us, no matter what the size of the tank or what we're doing. But yes, I agree. Standardization is definitely key. Making sure there's no oxygen uptake anywhere in the system.
I'll change gear ever so slightly here. This is a question that we've had on similar webinars quite a lot, and I don't know what experience some of you guys have got using leaf versus pellets as well, but certainly for aroma additions, I suppose, is there anything that's kind of a significant difference to how you've got to work with it, like from a process perspective, for for using leaf versus T90 pellets?
Well, I can answer that quickly. Down here, it's really hard to get the leaf. We rarely, if ever, get any leaf down to Mexico, just because I'm trying to get it across the border with before a couple of days. So we basically just use T90. We don't use pellets. Leaf almost ever.
Yeah, similar. We got Sierra Nevada down the street, and they take all the leaf for everybody. So we just use pellets.
Yeah, my first brewery, we used whole cone flowers for quite some time. The nice thing with the whole cone flowers is you physically can see the intact flowers, and that's something that you don't get with the T90s, of course. So you can, it's easier to see when you've opened up a crappy bag just by looking at it. You're not just going off by aroma. But yeah, they're really hard to process. Like dry hopping with them, either they float or stay loose in the tank, and you have to go in and get them out yourself, or you're packing them into like bags and stuff, and they float and don't get fully in contact with the beer. Yeah, it's like the benefits are definitely within the pellets. I think at least for modern style brewing. Yeah, and like I've also used like whole cone flowers on hot side, and yeah, having to get into the kettle to scoop out all the hops on a hot day while the next brew is waiting to come into the tank is not enjoyable, but sometimes has to be done.
Yeah, I think there's a reason Sierra Nevada developed a whole new piece of equipment just to handle their dry hopping with whole cone. We've used that for adjuncts, and I think we've done maybe 1 or 2 leaves in the past for small batches, but we would never put them in the tank. We'd put them in a canister and recirc over them because it's just too much work to get it out.
Yeah.
That's my take on it all. I've had similar experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've only used whole cone on cold side once at Burning Sky. We did that, but we researched through it. It was beautiful. I mean, we sort of described it as a bit more textural. Like there was something it pulled out that certainly T90s don't give you. I don't know if that was just all in our heads, but we were like, oh, it's great. It's great beer.
If it tastes great, it doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah, exactly.
Suppose as a follow-up, and this is going to be more based towards our US panelists on here. Have either of you guys regularly or occasionally brewed with fresh hops, and is there something specifically that you would say is a complete change of process with that? Obviously, we've got been doing our frozen fresh hops pre-orders at the moment, so it's a big topic amongst our brewing customers.
I was gonna say I've used fresh hops a few times. They are super fun and very like romantic to work with. I haven't used the frozen fresh hops quite yet. They are cumbersome. You have to plan your schedule entirely out just to meet your harvest or to get your crop in. We did, when I was at Kane Brewing Company, we did a 100% fresh hop beer that was kettle through dry hop. It was kettle, or it was an IPA if I remember correctly, because I remember stuffing those fresh hops into bags and then transferring the IPA into a bright tank to then transfer it into another bright tank. And I had to stuff the bags to the man door and then figure out a way to like secure the bags to the bottom of the tank so that they'd get all the flavor out of them. But it's a lot of fun. Generally, I find a lot of vegetal flavor in them, but it's like a very unique sort of flavor that is enjoyable.
Yeah, I'll be honest, we don't use fresh hops. It's not, we're pretty far, we're both on the East Coast. So again, it's got to get it on a plane and get it here quickly or use the frozen product. I've talked to West Coast brewers and I've had lots of beers that they make with fresh hops that are good. But again, I tend to find just that chlorophyll flavor is off-putting for me. It's not really what I enjoy personally. I've had some homebrews, honestly, that were really good with fresh hops from like somebody's yard. I don't know what the difference there is, but yeah, we don't use them too much. The folks that I do know who use them all use bags. They got to put them in bags in the world.
Got to put them in bags. Got to put them in bags.
They're just going to float off.
If I can chime in here, we actually had the benefit a few years ago of having a really good, small, very, very small hop farm here locally. And we loved using their hops. Fresh hops for me it's a seasonal, definitely. I wouldn't probably put it in as a full-time thing. As you guys said, it's really hard to clean out those tanks. But the flavor was fantastic. We would sell out of it in probably less than a week. We would definitely use our bittering hops, something, you know, very standard, a T90 Columbus or something. But for the final hops and for the dry hopping, we would always use his hops. Really good, lovely flavors. And what really worked for us well is we'd always keep a couple bags. And when people were sitting in our tasting room, we'd always, you know, give them a hop to put in their beer. And it was really a great way for people to learn a little more about hops. When he had to shut down his farm, he actually gave us a couple of the rhizomes, and we have them growing out in front of the brewery. And we still try to, at least once a year, put, you know, some hops on the table so people understand what's in their beer, which we think is a really cool idea. You know, so I really like using fresh hops.
It's great.
Yeah, I love the idea, and I do love the flavor I get from it. Like, I specifically remember Sierra Nevada used to make a fresh hop beer called Estate, which, if I remember correctly, was entirely like barley grown on their properties and hops that were grown on their properties, and it was just really, really beautiful. You know, it had like great, it probably was Cascade and Centennial if I had to bet. And, you know, very like piney orange, I remember.
Moving away from the cone stuff, hop burn is obviously it's a massive talking point and a massive issue for a lot of people. Is there something specific that you've done in your brew houses to tackle this? Is there kind of a specific process that you said, okay, this is the best thing that you can be doing to try and mitigate hop burn in the final beer?
For us, it's just been keeping very, very consistent with how much cold conditioning we're giving the beer. So we just give them all our bigger IPAs extended like 7 to 8 day cold conditioning period at 0.5. And that seems to have dealt with most of it. Yeah, I would say that's been the key for us, really. We started and it was maybe a bit less than that. And yeah, just because we're not transferring, we're not spinning or anything like that. So it's just, for us, it's just temperature and gravity.
I'd echo that sentiment. It's time and temperature for us. I also find dumping dry hop 24 hours after it's cold crashed has helped with that too. It helps with yield too if you're not fuging.
Yeah. So we'll do a few dumps over that.
Yeah.
Over that week basically, and then let things settle out.
Yeah, luckily we haven't had much experience with it, but we had one beer that it flared, or 2 beers that it flared up with, and it was because we're unit tanking. One of the mobile canners that we're using before we get our canning line up and running, the hammer that of the flow going in and out of the tank actually freed up some chunks, and like that made its way over to cans, and it ended up settling out. But like, yeah, there was more vegetal matter that caused a little bit of a burn immediately, but we had to sit in the cans for a while before it chilled out. So yeah, it's conditioning and dropping those hops from the tank definitely helps.
Yeah, dialing in that maturation process, whatever it is 100%. And we centrifuge. And honestly, having watched our flagship IPA and our double IPAs go from pre-centrifuge to now full centrifuge, they're much finer beers, finer in the, just more. There's a more nuanced flavor to them, and they're not kind of swinging you over the head with the flavor. And for us, it's also just been looking at hopping loads. I think a couple of folks mentioned, it was maybe Nathaniel saying, not going over 2 pounds per barrel on the cold side. You're going to get hop burn when you go 4 or 5. I think it's there. But we also do a little bit of kind of working that into the recipe, where we know that by the time it actually gets to the customer, it's going to be 2 weeks old or a week old if it's, you know, distributed all over Georgia where we are. And so we know that if we taste it out of the bright tank and it's got a little burn, we know where that trajectory is going to land when it hits someone's glass 5 days later or 7 days later. So we're okay with it starting out a little aggressive as long as it settles into, you know, the flavor that we want at the moment the customer gets it.
Yeah, I think with a bit of experience, you can tell what's the kind of hop burn, what's the kind of greenness that's going to condition out and what's going to stay.
Yeah.
We had a beer, or in previous brewery, we had a beer that was dry hopped with fruit, and that hop burn does not go away. Yeah.
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 I'd echo both of
We
those
had very
sentiments.
little experience with it, so not much there. We filter all our beers.
So it's something that we're talking about a little bit before the call went live, and it's come up a couple of times on the call as well, and that's hop creep. So is there any kind of specific things that you guys do to, again, try and mitigate that? And one immediate follow-up question that we get quite a lot is, and this is a question to, if anyone has the answer to this, is are there any noticeable differences between re-fermenting and not? So if you're kind of bottle and keg conditioning versus carbonating.
I'll jump in on the hop creep front. I mean, from our point of view, because we're not fusing, we're not filtering, there's only so much we can do, really. You know, we've got enzymes with a pretty high adjunct work, so we always will get a teeny bit in package. That's sort of mainly mitigated by the fact that most of our beer gets drank pretty fresh. You know, we're selling most of it direct, most of it through tap room, so it's all we know it's kept cold or sold direct to customer, and drank maybe a week or two. So not the best mitigation, but yeah, that would be a large part of, I think, why we would get away with it more. But yeah, beyond that, dropping as much yeast out as possible. For the bigger beers, letting the creep happen in tank, it's going to happen at all, rather than it happening in package. So just holding it warm a few more days than we might normally. But yeah, we've not had anything beyond like half a point of gravity, not Plato, but of half a point of gravity impact. So that's been the absolute worst when we had a very, very bad heat wave here. But yeah, beyond that, we've been fine.
Here on our site, what kind of works for us is I guess the dry hop and cold, and we tend to avoid any kind of recirculating or rousing of the tank, just to avoid getting whatever yeast we can't drop off back into suspension. That kind of works for us, or at least we haven't had any issues with any of the beers so far. But my previous experience, previous brewery, we had like supermarket brands and stuff that had to go into supermarkets where cold chain was not guaranteed, and yeah, we had to like make sure that the hop creep was happening in the tank and not on the shelf. Yeah, so that was kind of just like knowing that it's going to happen, making it happen in a controlled environment. But yeah, I think it's a pain. It doubles your retention time in the tank and everything, but also recalling beers on the shelf that are re-fermenting, that's no fun either.
Our main concern is making sure we don't package beer that has diacetyl in it. Obviously, we don't see re-fermentation in the package because of the centrifuge. So if you pull out all the yeast, you should be in a static position, as long as you have good micro. So, we've been through, I was mentioning to the guys before we started, since 2017, we've been through a whole range of solutions for hop creep, settled on a combination of changing mash temperatures to accommodate the FG that we want, with incorporating creep, then using ALDC to limit diacetyl production, and then timing our dry hops so that we can get the beers out of the tank and off the yeast in time. We don't do much re-fermenting in conditioning for clean beers. We do that with mixed fermentation quite a bit, and there's a different calculus that goes into that. But for lagers, we have been experimenting at our smaller brewery with kind of just spunding those and doing conditioning in the tank and naturally carbonating in a bright tank, which has been fun. And there's been a little bit of kind of calculus of, all right, well, we've got hops in here, we may get an extra, so let's use a little less sugar or fresh wort to charge those, to krausen those beers. So that's been fun to mess around with. But our main steps for mitigation are enzymes to limit diacetyl production, and then working with the centrifuge. For the double IPAs, though, there is a little bit of a kind of a start high, finish high. When we've gone up in OG and original gravity on those, we've seen better results and less creep just because the yeast is worn out. It's attenuated to its full limit and it's done. And so with a lower gravity beer with a heavy hop load, we see a lot more creep. Yeah. So in the 14 Plato OG range, that could creep down to 1. If we start at 19 and we finish at 5, we have a nice full bodied beer and the yeast is completely done. So a little bit of that, a little bit of kind of mitigation just based on where we start and where we finish.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of creep in our table beer, can pick up a bit.
Yeah.
So obviously that's mashed very, very high. So there's a lot of longer chains there.
A lot of substrate.
yeah. And yeah, it's the only one where we've ever had an issue was a lower gravity beer, and just comes with the territory really.
We talked about that dry hopping in our pale ale. It's a 12 Plato starting gravity, I think. We have to dry hop on day 3 to be able to crash it on time without it just running away from us. But we don't have to harvest from that beer, so that's a nice trick there.
And we combat, like we've been talking about with ALDC. I think a lot of, like with my process, letting the hops sit. I guess first off, we do dry hop at temperature, at fermentation temperature, and then we just watch pressure and gravity in the tank. So generally, if something's spewing, it's putting a lot of pressure on the tank, it might take another day before we're willing to crash it.
In our case, it's the same. We just let it ferment a little longer if need be. As far as packaging, about 7 years ago, we decided that everything had to be filtered. Unfortunately, here in Mexico, one of the biggest problems is cold shipping. It really doesn't exist. So our beer was being shipped through deserts, really hot temperatures, and we were beginning to have problems, re-fermentation and during shipping. So the only way around it was really to filter, similar to a centrifuge, and just leave a clean beer at the end, so there's nothing left in there to really have a problem as it ships all over Mexico.
One thing that Brandon was talking about there. So with regards to like dry hopping at different temperatures for different beer styles, I know that's kind of depending on which market you go into. Obviously, we're in Europe, so we've got a huge kind of traditional market, a massive kind of modern American hop forward market as well. You got Chris in Berlin as well, a huge kind of traditional lager market as well. Are there any specific kind of catch-all tricks to kind of temperatures and dry hopping ratios per style at all?
I'll for dry hop lagers, I will dry hop late in lagering, sort of call it just like kissing it with hops right before it comes out. I find that preserves the flavor the best. So I'm dry hopping there at whatever it would be, 30 or 35 degrees Fahrenheit for the lagering temperature. As far as IPAs and American IPAs, I find with my hazies, I will dry hop them at temperature, at fermentation temperature, but I have been experimenting more with a style that I was taught how to brew, 12, 15 years ago, when IPAs were crashed to 55 degrees Fahrenheit dry hop for 2 days and then cold conditioned for 7 to 10 days. So I am sort of starting to go back to that, experiment with American West Coast IPAs.
I think
It's
Vinny at
interesting.
Russian River did that a little bit as well.
I'm sorry, say that again, Brandon.
I said I think Vinny at Russian River did that a little bit as well.
I think it's in the hops book, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I agree with Mike on lagers. We do several hoppy lagers. Most of them are all Whirlpool hops, but when we have had good success with dry hop lager, it's been post fermentation or during lagering. I don't like the flavor interplay of lager yeast and hops. It gets sulfury really fast, and it just
I agree.
Yeah. So for lager, generally colder is fine, even when you're using the new Nouveau German varieties or American varieties to dry hop. I think colder works better and shorter contact time. For, you know, the hazies and those, I think almost all of those are at fermentation temperature for us. Just works better.
Out of interest, what's everyone, those who don't fuse, what's your sort of tank residency time for a hazy?
We were talking about that before we got on. Right, I'm installing a fuse probably in about 2 weeks, so I'm about to start playing with that. But I'm on average, I'd say 15 to 17 days for a hazy IPA from brew house to package.
Okay.
We're closer to 21.
Yeah.
I'm I'm the odd one out with the uni tanks here. We're still trying to dial everything in, and we're at the widths of the beer. The beer tells us when it's ready. But I have turned tanks. Oddly, the double IPAs are turning out with a more standardized tank retention. We're sitting around anywhere around 18 to 21 days with them. Some of the IPAs take a bit longer for whatever reason. But yeah, we're kind of targeting some cell counts and making sure that the flavor is correct. All the CO2 that we're getting in the beer, that's we're not bubbling the beer, so we're adding that through head pressure in the tank. So that in itself takes time. But yeah, we're happy with the results that's coming out of it.
Yeah, you were saying that your foam is ridiculous, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that like every time I see a glass get poured out, it's like, oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
we
we're just carbonating and head pressure as well.
Yeah,
Far prefer it.
Yeah. It takes a bit more time, and it's a bit more difficult to standardize between the team, like how people are doing it. Are they leaving it on for this length of time? But I think the results like speak for themselves. That foam that just doesn't quit in the glass, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's great.
How long are you staying in for your hazies, Robin?
About 12 days. Oh, sorry, I thought you said me.
No, it's okay. You're fusing.
17 to 21 days, depending on it. But for the differs, it's a fair bit longer than that. We just found we were packing them and they were green and not very nice. And yeah, it was just much improved. Like all the reviews for the first week coming out when we were packaging them after 21 days were just, oh yeah, we could have done with an extra week on this. And it's like, well, okay, we'll give you the extra week. So
yeah, for sure.
It's just made them much more consistent. Yeah, there's a few areas I want to tighten up. So obviously, yeah, we've got such a small site here. Any extra day is money. But at the moment, it's just been about getting the beer consistent, and then we'll work on the timing. So,
Nathaniel, you're not making any hazy beer. You said you're filtering everything.
We make our pale ale. We make it hazy. We change the yeast on it. Use a London fog, and it's great. It's basically all Citron Mosaic. Only in keg. We don't really we don't can it because, as I mentioned, we still have issues with cold shipping, so we don't want it to be shipped anywhere if it's not completely filtered. Of course, filtering will kill the haze. So we make that. And we also make a New England IPA, which is also hazy, also only in keg. So we do a couple things down here.
So has haze craze hit Mexico yet?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Has the haze craze hit Mexico yet?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, we sell out, we do about 15 barrels of each once a month, and they're sold out within, before the next one comes out.
Wow.
One question that our team get asked quite a lot is about like different technology for or different equipment, I should say, rather, for dry hopping as well. A couple of you mentioned recircling, rousing. Robin, you mentioned that you used a hop gun at Burning Sky. Are there any kind of noticeable differences kind of in your own experience to using some of these techniques versus others?
So from weirdly, I know Burning Sky have actually moved away from the hop gun, and they've gone back to hops in the top and rousing. They said they're getting much more consistent results with that. And I remember the hop gun from a labor perspective was crazy in terms of
Cleaning it.
just it was basically, yeah, cleaning it. It was taking one person maybe half a shift to deal with all the stuff they needed dealing with. Yeah, it was crazy. I think it was probably an undersized hop gun for the amount of, like, for the charge that we were actually using. But yeah, it was just the clean down of it on it was mad. But yeah, we just we've basically got a doser that you can purge through with CO2 and then drop through a 4-inch valve in the top of the tank. We're only on 30, very short for 30 hect tanks. So yeah, it's quite easy for us, pretty low tech. I'm quite a keep it simple, keep it low tech kind of guy. So yeah, it was just drop it in the top and purge through the hops. So it's pretty minimal oxygen getting in, and then we just rouse. But certainly, I think agitation is key to getting any consistent flavor out.
Yeah,
we use both techniques. We put it in the top and we go through the bottom. It depends also on the size of the tank, because when you get into some of the bigger tanks, it's quite a ways up there, and just personnel wise, we don't want someone hanging out up there with 2 buckets worth of hops. So that's what we started using, hop guns and similar things. And I agree, it does take a lot of time to clean and make sure it's properly set up, but it's safer. It's safer, and sometimes it's better. We recirculate with pumps. If we do open the top, we try to make sure there's a good layer of CO2 in there. Obviously, you're finishing fermentation, so you should have sufficient CO2. At times when we're at a doubt, we'll usually put a little bit of CO2 in there while we are opening the top, just to make sure that we don't get any additional air in. Our hop back or our hop gun we definitely, after cleaning, we purge everything with CO2 once we have all the hops in there, and try to make sure we have as little oxygen uptake in any of those processes, whatever it may be.
What size tanks do you have, Nathaniel?
We have 7s, we have 15s, we have 30s, we have 60s, and a couple of 120s on the way.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah.
I think the best piece of equipment that I've ever purchased for dry hopping was a scissor lift.
Yeah, no ladders.
No ladders. No, we're an over the top dry hopping brewery.
Yeah, it's the same here for us. We have a gangway on our fermentation. Yeah. But yeah, like all our dry hops at their end of fermentation, cold as well. We tend to sponge our tanks. So typically before dry hop, we'll have about, I don't know what it is in PSI, but 0.4 bar pressure that will vent off slowly. And then as we're opening the tank, we don't have like a port like Robin has. We just open the tank to the atmosphere, but we'll keep CO2 coming in through gently through the CIP apparatus. So it's constantly given like a forward pressure. Then we dry hop there, and then with the 0.4 bar of pressure, spunded pressure, we get a little bit of rousing, so that eliminates the hops rafting. and we have good headspace in the tank, so we're not worried about gushing or anything. And then, yeah, with that, all those kind of things in place, we're typically under 5-6 parts per billion when the beer is finished out and ready for packaging. So it's working well for us. I have used hop guns in previous breweries, like at Burning Sky. It was definitely undersized. We worked around we didn't have options to dry hop from the top of the tank due to height, safety, and there wasn't any ports to dry hop in through. So we ended up lifting the filter out of the hop gun, changing the pump to a low shear pump, like a PD pump, and then using it pretty much like a dosing tank to get all the hops in. It worked. We still struggled with hop creep. And I think that was like part of it, that recirculation, and with our tanks not being able to fully drop the yeast. So there's a lot of variables there that we were probably all blaming on the hop gun. But yeah, right now, no hop gun, simple, hops go in the top, beer goes in the glass, and we're all happy.
Yeah, I'll stand out as the quote unquote big brewer here, because we're 340 barrel fermenters. You know, they're 40 feet high, so we can't get up there. We don't have a gangway. We didn't put one in, unfortunately. So we use a hop cannon, you know, and it's 400-pound charge put in there, just blasting it all the way up the arm with CO2. Luckily, it's really low O2 because the tank is sealed and it's very safe. I've had times where I've had beer coming up at me out of a top port. It's not fun, to be honest, as a lift or a ladder, and you know, see that foam rising while you're dry hopping a beer that may still be fermenting. So that has really helped us. And then, like we talked about, we do the hop cannon in, and then a 4-hour recirc with a load pump.
And are you creating a slurry with your hops before they go in?
No,
or they go in dry?
Yeah, it's all dry. So, you know, one of the good things about, y'all mentioned the labor and cleaning and dosing, we're so consistent. We're doing dry hops almost every day. So it's just part of the daily tasks, and, you know, we're staffed to that point. So it's just a constant, and also we don't have to, because we're dry hopping one beer repeatedly, we don't have to clean the hop cannon every time. You can clean it once a day or once every 2 days and just keep it CO2 environment, you know, in there. And that works pretty well for us. But yeah, no slurry. Generally, we're trying to keep all the beer in the tank and not pull it out into any other vessel unless it's just a pump.
Brendan, have you experimented with different recirc times? So have you found an optimum?
Yeah, extensively.
Yeah,
extensively.
I'd be really curious to hear about that.
We used to, back in the day, this is probably 6 years ago, we used to do 24-hour recircs. And that was pre-hop creep days, and things have kind of changed. And we did 24, then we did 12s. We've basically come down over the course of our time as a brewery from 24 to 4, finding that anything more than 4 is just kind of you're not getting any more return of flavor out of it. So 4 has been really solid for us, where we see that we get better flavor, quicker re-fermentation, so quicker creep, and then we're ready to go and kind of optimize to get out of there. So yeah, 4 hours is the minimum for us, and it's not super high. We go out the bottom port and in through the racking arm to kind of stir, you know, in that direction, and keep the pump at maybe 75%. So probably like 45, 50 hertz, but it's a big tank. So it's, you know, it's not really doing much as far as just turning it over.
You're not losing any foam or anything. Like, I'm guessing you're keeping the tank on pretty good head pressessure. It's not causing
under pressure. Once we're dry hopped, it's capped at about 10 psi. Sometimes it builds up to 15 and, you know, vents out through the PRV. But yeah, under pressure after dry hop the whole time.
Okay.
Yeah, our foam could use some work, but I think there's some other things that go into it as well.
That's a good point. I don't think any of us have.
Oh,
I'm sorry. No, I was going to say, I don't think any of us have explicitly said that we cap our dry hop on the live session. I think it's all. Oh, yeah, I know, I do too. I think we've all said it. I think we all said it in the private session, but we didn't say it in the public session that we're capping our fermentation, or capping the outport.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're capping at the end of firm, and then dry hopping under pressure, a little bit of pressure.
Yeah, I didn't mean to take wind out of your sails there, Robin. You were going to ask something.
No. well, all I was going to say was asking Brendan if he was able to get a dry hop and a recirc in just on one brewer's shift, or is that partly why you did it, or was it just purely a flavor?
Yeah, it's partly why we did it. We've conventionally been, until recently, it's scaling up to the larger brewery. We were 3 shifts for 4 years, okay. 3 shifts of brewers, but we split our brewers and cellar people. So we have full-time cellar persons and we have full-time brewers. They don't share responsibilities. So generally what will happen is they'll prep dry hops the night before, come in, dry hop, recirc, and then be done. So yeah, generally they can start the recirc, and sometimes I'll ask the brewer to cut it because they're here till later in the evening, but generally it's all in one shift.
Cool. I think we'll definitely go down that route.
Yeah.
Cool. Then I'm going to round things out with a question that I like to ask people when we've got a group of great brewers on a call. And that's, if you could give a startup brewer one tip with regards to hop usage at any point during the brewing process, what would it be? So I'll go around the group for this one. So Mike, how about you?
Ooh, I think if you're starting out and trying to, whether it's a new brewery or new brewer, my advice is always less is more. I think that you can always step up what you're doing, whether it's your dry hop, your bitterness, your kettle, but you can't take that away. So, and generally I find, it's why hazy IPA is so accepted today, is that it's a less offensive American IPA. So it's less bitter, it's more aromatic, but it doesn't have all the, the classic notes that we all probably grew up liking from IPA. So less is more.
Cool. How about you, Chris?
I don't know, I guess store your hops well. Keep them cold. Try and get them out of contact with air and everything, and try and get the best hops that you can get. That can be complicated when you're on a smaller size, but I guess get used to like breaking up hop pellets and smelling them and get an idea of what's good, what works, what transfers into the beer, and use all that as data points for like understanding what makes good beer.
Awesome. Robin, how about you?
I would say know what you're trying to achieve, and then you'll have a better idea of how you're going to get there. So I think it's kind of what you were saying, Chris, in terms of like, don't just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. Think, okay, I want to make a beer that tastes like this. Try some hops. What do they actually smell like? Does that translate well? Do these work well together? Or am I just throwing 5 things that say they're tropical together for the hell of it? Kind of understand the flavors that you're really trying to achieve, and then go from there. And keep it simple.
Nathaniel?
Sorry, we didn't hear you. You're talking to me?
Nathaniel, how about you?
Okay. Well, what I did, when I started out, which I recommend, is finding a beer you like. Pick a beer. You like Russian River. I'm sure you can find a clone online and try to imitate it and see how your hop usage compares to that beer that you really like. I guess the bottom line is experimentation. You have to find something and try to hit that goal and see how you stack up to what you really like. And if it doesn't work the first time, just try it again. Change things up. Keep notes. I think one of the basic things that I've learned over the years is always to write things down all the way up to the end. Because usually when we start drinking the beer, we forget to take notes. What did it taste like? Was it good? Did we like it? Did we not? What would we change? But by that point, we're already drinking and we're like, forget the notes. So I think good notes is important, and definitely experiment based on what you like.
And finally, Brandon.
I'm probably going to take the more boring route here, but I think it's honestly for me the most important. If it was a new brewery and they said how to get the best out of their hops, I would honestly say buy a dissolved oxygen meter. because you can put hops in the beer, you can do whatever you want, but if you don't know what your DO is in the bright tank or in the package, it doesn't matter what you did before that. That was the biggest change for us in quality of our beer in our second year or so, was we bought a DO meter and we realized that our bright tanks were at 500 before we were even putting beer into them. And now we go below 200 and our pickup is, 20 or 30, and our pickup in our canning line is, TPOs of under 30. And it's like that, those made the biggest difference in the quality of beer to customers, rather than what hops we put in, how we changed, process and research or dry hopping, the dissolved oxygen at the end of the process. We always joke packaging can't make a 10 beer a 100, but they can take a 100 to a 10 real fast. So we always have to protect against, the final step, and getting it to someone's glass is the most important for us, I think.
Really good point.
Well, I'm going to round things up, but a massive thanks to you all for joining us today. It's been great talking to you all, and thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
See ya. Bye.